logs, just a few variables and columns here that we're also creating. So you can run these step by step, or you can kind of highlight them all and just run them in sequence. So we're creating a few tables here, 5 tables, campaign change logs. We're going to be creating an email sends table that holds all our email send data. An email opens table, which holds all the data that relates to emails that are being opened. Email clicks. And the last one being email unsubscribes, right? So whenever someone unsubscribes from an email, that is logged into this table here. So once you've created those tables, and you've created that database, you've created the schema, you've created the stage as well, and you've created the spines of the tables, you should see on the left-hand side here in your database explorer, there should be a database called Braze Engagement. There's a schema called email data, and then there's those 5 tables that we've created, and also the stage that we created right before we created those 5 tables. So it should look something like this. Cool. Now, once we've created the spine of the tables, what we'll then do is now we'll actually start ingesting the data itself, right? And just for the sake of simplicity, what we've done here is we've simply just uploaded each of these CSVs into these drive links over here. So if you go into the quick start and you go into step 5 and you see each of these 5 links, each of these is just a CSV, and you can go ahead and click onto each of them, and they'll pretty much help you take you to a drive link, and you can essentially download the data manually. So you can download the CSV like that, right? So I've already downloaded all of them, so I won't do the rest of them. Once you've done all that, you're then able to upload the files to the stage that we created before. And then once they're in the stage, you can then copy that data into the tables, into that structure that we've created. Okay, cool. So now what we're going to do is I'll just show you just how we can add those files to the stage. So if you go into the left-hand side here, and you go into the database, the schema, and the stage, and you go into the email stage that we created there, and then we can double click onto it, or you can just kind of open the stage details in a new tab. That'll take you to a section where you can then add files to that stage. So in this case, I've already added everything here. So in your example, this should be all blank. But what you can simply do is you can go into the Add Files button. Very easy stuff. You can do this manually with SQL as well, but I'm just showing you guys, how you can do it in just like a UI by default. Pretty much use those 5 files that we downloaded before. And then you can see here, just make sure that, we're going to save them into the right stage. In this case, you have email data, email stage, and then that's all you have to do. And then just hit upload. So I won't hit upload because I've already done it. So once you've done that, you should see these 5 CSVs now being in your stage here before. Ignore this YAML file for now. That's really our semantic model that comes later. But for now, you'll see these 5 CSVs pop up in your email stage. Cool. So now that we've added those files to the stage, the next thing we're going to do is we're now going to copy that data from the stage into those tables that we've created. So in order to do that, we can simply just use the copy into function, the statement, and that essentially copies into what we're doing here in this first one is we're referencing the name of the table. So in this case, campaign change logs, and we're just copying into that table these specific columns, right? So column 1 to 7 from the stage, from the schema, right? And the file itself that we're copying that data from is the changelog campaigns view. So that CSV, we're just pretty much copying the rows from that CSV into that table that we've created below. And we can also specify a file format as well. So you don't have to specify this file format every time. You can reference the file format as a variable. You can create the file format once and then, just reference it as a file format. But in this case, we're just doing the full thing where we're telling it it's a CSV. Skip the header, there's a comma delimiter, so pretty standard stuff. And the next thing, this last statement is pretty much saying that if there is ever an error that comes up with ingesting any row that comes from that CSV, we're just going to abort the whole statement. So we're just not going to ingest anything. So it's either all or nothing, right? So that's the first copy into we're doing. And then the rest of the tables follow a similar structure, right? We're basically copying into that table from the CSVs that are stored and we upload it onto that stage, right? So we're doing it for campaign change logs. We've done it for email sends. We've done it for email opens, and we do it for email clicks. And then we also do it for email unsubscribes as well. So all 5 tables have now been ingested with data. And once you've done that, you can go ahead and maybe run a few select statements, make sure that there's actually data that sits inside of there. What I like to do as well is you can also go into the UI itself. So if you don't want to write SQL, similar to what we did for the stage where we just kind of opened the pop-up bar, we can also open the tables up in a new tab as well. So in this case, it'll take you to your database explorer. It'll take you to the table where it'll kind of tell you all this information about like how the table was actually created, what the initial table definition was, what kind of columns are in there. But more importantly, I just like to kind of preview the data itself, right? Just to make sure that there's actually something sitting in these tables, right? So you can see here, you have a bunch of campaign logs. You have some information about emails being clicked, emails being opened, emails being sent, right? This is all data that comes from Braze, right? And then email unsubscribe, so the people that have actually unsubscribed to the email. So we churned on these users. All right, cool. So now that we've ingested all the Braze data into Snowflake, that really takes us to our next step, right? Where we want to build a semantic model on top of all that data that we've then ingested. So, and this semantic model is then going to help us use Cortex Analyst and then hook up Cortex Analyst to a Streamlit application. And then your business user can use that Streamlit application to ask questions in natural language and, get a response and get a text to SQL response, right? So I've already talked through that. Yeah, that's fine. The next step is we're going to create a semantic model. And, there's a few ways that you can actually create a semantic model. You can just you can write your own YAML file if you know what you're doing, and then you can ingest that YAML file into a stage. But I think the easiest thing to do is to actually use our AI and ML Studio. So if you go into our AI and ML tab, you go into Cortex Analyst. Right. What you can see here is you can actually create a new semantic model. You can also upload your semantic model if you already have something saved, or you can create a semantic view as well. So in this case, we're creating a semantic model. And this is all the things you need to get started, right? So you need to then first initially point it to where you want to save the semantic model. So in this case, we want to save it to the stage that we've created in the Braze engagement, the email data schema, and the email stage. And then if we just call this, semantic model, all right, I think this is the second one I've created, so I'll just call it V2. You can give it a description, whatever you like. But then if we go ahead and click on next, we can then specify exactly what tables we want to create the semantic model on, right? So in this case, we want to create the semantic model on that email data, on those 5 tables that we have there before. So if you go into this quick start, you can follow this step by step where it just tells you exactly what we're doing. So I'll pretty much walk through it and talk through it as well. So once we've done that, if you selected the 5 tables for your semantic model, you can go ahead and click on next. Then you can actually specify the columns that you want as well. So sometimes you don't want to bring in every single column because maybe some of these columns are just irrelevant. In this case, we're just going to follow, which columns we want, right? So in this case, we're just going to follow external user ID, dispatch ID, etc., and just kind of go down this list and click on the columns that are specified here. All right. So in this case, I won't, in the interest of time, I'm not just going to do that. I've already done this before, so I'm just going to pretend like we're going to use all these columns. All right. So this is not good practice. So I'm just doing this for the sake of a demo. But yeah, just kind of follow along to the quick start and just pick out the individual columns that it's asking you to do, because sometimes you don't want to overcomplicate a semantic model as well. All right. So once we've done that, you can then go ahead and create and save the semantic model. In this case, I won't do that because I've already created it. And what you see is that once you've created, you see your semantic model now pop up here. So in this case, I've created one before called Campaign Analytics Model. And if you click onto it, then this is where we can actually of the tables themselves, right? The next thing you would then have to do is you would have to, because we have multiple tables, we have 5 tables here. We also want to kind of specify the relationships between those tables, right? Because, if we're doing multiple tables, the semantic model needs to know how these tables are kind of joined together. And then that's what this kind of next step, similar for open to changelog or quick to changelog, unsubscribe to changelog, right? So the way you do it is you just add a new relationship. You can name the relationship that you want. In this case, it's good practice to just say like, okay, sends table to like changelog table, specify the table that we're joining together. So in this case, email sends, email campaign changelogs, and then we also need to specify the primary key that links them together, right? So in this case, it's going to be campaign, API ID, and API ID. Right, and you can join off multiple columns as well, as much as you want. But in this case, one column is sufficient. And then that's all you need, right? And then you can just add that relationship. So go ahead and kind of do that for all the possible scenarios. So we're going to have 4 possible joins with 5 tables. And you can kind of follow along to this quick sign. It'll tell you exactly what those primary keys are and what those tables are and what to call the join itself. Now, once you've done that, you can also, we'll also take a step back here and we'll also add some metrics as well. So metrics are very important because, sometimes you want to add stuff that is outside of those columns. So in this case, maybe you want the count of the total amount of clicks in an email, right? So in this case, the expression for that metric is going to be count ID. Also, maybe you want the count of the distinct number of users. In this case, it's going to be the count distinct of external user ID. And then the metric name itself is going to be, we're just going to be calling it unique clickers. So we're going to add some metrics for each of these tables that we have. So if we go into here, if we scroll up a bit, you can see that, you have dimensions, you have time dimensions on the table, you have facts, but you also have a column called metrics, all right? So in this case, we have the email clicks table. If we go into metrics, we can actually add a new metric. In this case, we can call it total clicks. The metric name is total clicks, and then the expression of the metric itself is the function count ID. So that's going to be the metric that we're creating. And you can go ahead and add that metric, add as many metrics as you want. In this case, I've already done it. We're adding total clicks, unique clickers, total sends, unique amount of sends, total unsubscribes, the unique amount of unsubscribes, and total email opens and the unique amount of openers. Cool. So once you've gone ahead and done that, the last thing you have to do is then we're just going to add some custom instructions for our semantic model. And what custom instructions are is you can kind of essentially think of them as prompt engineering, right? So if you tell the semantic model, hey, if your business user, is asking about engagement, right? Engagement, we define that as emails being opened or emails being clicked. Same thing as success. If someone asks, how successful a campaign is, whenever someone opens an email or clicks on an email, then that's what we consider success. And it's just adding a few other prompts that you'd expect to give an LLM, right? Like, you want to tell it that the data set only has data from June 2023 to 2025. And, you most likely be asked questions about engagement, about success. This is what they mean when they say engagement and success, right? So it's just pretty much giving some custom instructions to the semantic model. So it knows, how to answer some of these questions. Now, and you can do that, if you scroll all the way up to the top, you can just add custom instructions over here, right? So just put that into our tab, and I've done that, and then just hit apply. And whenever you're working with semantic model, it's just good practice to also just hit save as well, just to make sure that you don't lose any of your progress. So now that we've added a custom instruction, we've added the metrics, we've added the relationships as well. What we can then do is we can actually start to test and play around with the semantic model and just see how successful it actually is. So on the right-hand side here, you can actually see that we do have a UI that's good for validation and testing already. So you can actually ask it some questions already. So in this case, we're just going to ask it some sample questions, see if this actually works. Okay, what campaign had the most unsubscribes of all time, right? So what was the worst performing campaign, right? So if we go ahead and run that question, you can see Cortex Analyst is then going to read that question and try to come up with a response. So it's going to understand that question. It's then going to translate that question into a SQL statement. It's going to run that SQL statement, and then it's going to give you the response back. So in this case, back in stock favorites was the worst most engagement, right? So you got 481 opens and 481 clicks. So this is the most successful campaign that we've had in the last 180 days. As a QA tester, yep, this looks correct to me. So I'm also going to just add that as a verified query. So when you've done that, when you've added those two as a verified queries, they'll pop up over here. And you can see, these are the kind of questions that are being asked. This is the SQL that it's correctly responded in. And then if someone else asks that kind of question, that's the kind of response that the semantic model is going to give. That's the kind of response that Cortex Analyst is going to give. And you can also see exactly, who has actually added that verified query. So it's auditable, when did they actually add it. So you can go ahead and save this semantic model. It's pretty much now good to go. The last thing I want to show you guys is, you can also, for some of you more technical folks out there, right? Yes, this is very good for someone that's not technical. This is all very drag and drop UI, but you can also go into an edit YAML file, and this takes you to the editor itself. So just as easily, or I shouldn't say just as easily, but if you are more technical, you do prefer just manually hard coding your YAML file and manually hard coding your semantic model, you can do that in the YAML editor here below, right? Anything that is changed here is going to be reflected here, and likewise anything that's changed here in this drag and drop UI is going to be reflected in this YAML. It's a one-to-one comparison, right? These are basically the same thing. Yeah. Cool. So that's just the last thing I wanted to show you guys, and yeah, your semantic model is pretty much all good to go. So go ahead and save that semantic model, and now we can kind of wrap up here by creating the front end application. So we've created the semantic model. So what have we done? We've ingested the Braze data. We've created the semantic model on top of that Braze data. Now we need to find a way to then hook up the semantic model to Cortex Analyst to the front end user, right? So we want to build an application for your business user. Now, there's a few ways you can do that. So obviously you can choose whatever downstream application you want. But in this case, for the purpose of this lab, we're going to be building out a Streamlit application. So if we go into our projects, if you go into Streamlit, I've already created one over here. It's called My Engagement Analytic app. But just before I kind of run it, you can go ahead and create a new Streamlit application. Just make sure it's kind of saved at the same location of your database that we've created. So in this case, I'm just going to switch to a different role, make sure I can see those tables. So in this case, you might create my Braze app, choose Braze engagement, right? You want to just save it into the public schema because you want everyone to be able to access this app, maybe. And then, once you've created, you can go ahead and open the Streamlit application, and then it should just take you to a default Streamlit file with a lot of default code. So don't worry about all that code. What we'll then do is we'll go into our quick start. And then if you go into step 8, there's actually a section here that has, that's all you have to do. So I won't go through this line by line because I know some folks here maybe aren't the most technical, and maybe Python isn't your code of choice, but I will kind of talk through some of the key elements here, right? So you can see here, obviously we do import the packages to work with at first. The next thing we do, and this is very important and crucial for the application to work, right? We're pointing it to the semantic model. So we're giving it a path where we're saying, okay, so you can actually specify multiple paths, right? If you have multiple semantic models. But in this case, we just want to specify the campaign analytics model, semantic model that we created before. And where is that stored? It's stored in the Braze engagement database, the email data schema, the email stage, and then that is the YAML file itself, right? And this is the REST API endpoint, right? This is what is going to call our Cortex analyst service, right? So that's the API endpoint. That's very important as well. And then we're also giving it a timeout. So we're saying if you can't get a response in 50,000 milliseconds, then timeout, right? So those are the three important variables that we need to make sure we have, and then we're going to reference that in our code. So I won't go through everything. If you can go through this in your own time. But what I do want to talk about is if we scroll down a bit, you can see there's a part where there's a function that pretty much gets your analyst response. And in this case, this is where we're calling Cortex API, right? So we're calling the API endpoint over here. We're also going to be referencing it to the semantic model file as well. So in this case, you can see here, the semantic model file is the variable that we have saved up above, right? So this function is what's actually calling Cortex Analyst, and it's referencing that semantic model file. Now, the next thing I want to do is I also want to show you guys a few functions where we're going to be calling the complete function as well, right? So remember what I said in the beginning of this lab, we're using Cortex Analyst, yes, but we're also going to be querying and coming up with recommendations for your next best action, right? For your campaign. So there's a function here called get summary and recommendations. And you can see here what it's actually doing is it's using our Cortex complete function to generate a summary based on the query of results. And you can see here, it's just actually calling a simple SQL function, right? A simple SQL query. We're calling the complete function. In the complete function, you can specify the LLM that you want to use. And the second prompt and the second argument that you put into that complete function is the prompt itself, right? And in this case, something like, okay, a user has asked a question about their marketing engagement data. So this is the prompt that you've asked Streamlit. This is the data that was responded to that user. And from that, give us a response that kind of helps them create a marketing campaign, right? So it kind of recommends them the next best action. And then there's also another prompt that we're giving it as well. So this is doing the same thing where we're calling another complete function. And we're also saying on top of that, also give us a relevant follow-up question as well. So kind of give us a recommendation on what else we should be asking to kind of further dig into that data and further try to understand that campaign data, right? So this will all kind of make a bit more sense when I actually do the demo of the Streamlit application, but that's the key things that I wanted to kind of point out in this Python code, which you will see being reflected in the Streamlit application itself. All right, so if we actually go ahead and run the application itself, so we go back out, and then we go into our Streamlit application, and then this is the UI that we've actually built out now, right? So in this case, it starts off with a default question, what kind of questions can I ask this chatbot, right? And it tells you straight away, okay, this semantic model, it has a lot of data about email marketing from June 2022 to June 2025. You can track email campaign performance. You can do this, you can do that, blah, blah. You can, examine trends and why people have unsubscribed. And you go on your left-hand side here, you can also specify the semantic model. In this case, we've only just got that one semantic model. So let's go ahead and ask a question. In this case, I think we had some verified queries here, so it's already been saved here, but let's just ask it like, okay, what campaign was the most successful, right, in the last 180 days? And you can see here, this is the final product that the business user is going to see, right? They can ask a question, it's going to wait for itself, right? And then you can see here, like we said, the end of season clearance was the most successful one. But you can also see another separate tab where it's saying a summary and a recommendation. So it's saying that, okay, yeah, end of season clearance campaign was the most successful. As a marketeer using Braze, you can kind of use this insight to understand which campaigns are performing well. You might even analyze the tactics used in end of season clearance, and then just kind of tells you some hints and tricks as to how you could drive further engagement on the Braze platform. And the next thing we did is we also wanted it to send a follow-up. So let's just ask it a question asking about, okay, what are the tactics and strategies that we use in the end of season campaign that contributed to its success, right? So that could be a follow-up question that we ask Cortex analyst, right? So if we actually go into, maybe we can ask it something like, what time zone had the highest engagement for back in stock campaign? So maybe we ran this around the world. If we go into our Braze, we can type that. What time zone had the highest engagement for back in stock campaigns? So Cortex Analyst is going to interpret that question. It's then going to come back with a response. It's going to generate a SQL statement, and it's going to say that, okay, Asia and Singapore was actually the highest engagement for that campaign. And then maybe a follow-up. So there are there is some recommendations about what else you could do to kind of further action this data point. And then the follow-up is, okay, well, what patterns are there and what more can be analyzed for that Asia Singapore time zone? So if we just click on that follow-up question, let's see what it actually comes back with, right? And that obviously comes with a loaded SQL query as well. And if you actually go into, quite a loaded SQL query actually, if you go into the results itself, you can now see that it's actually broken down that campaign by demographics, by some metrics, by some timing patterns as well, like what day of the week did they open on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, what hour of the day did it open, and also, what gender distribution did we see? So it's kind of like breaking down that campaign into further subsections that you can then further analyze and further understand, right? So in this case, you might have had 100. It seems to be more popular with men than female with this particular campaign is what we're trying to see here. And then, of course, it's going to also come up with some more follow-up questions that you can further dig into and also come up with a recommendation about what you can actually do as well. So in this case, we're seeing that, okay, they're actually more active at certain times at 10 a.m., 2 p.m., and 8 p.m. And we're actually seeing that they're more engaged on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Like, this is the sort of insights that we're actually digging out, and this is the sort of campaigns that we should be running. Cool. I think that was pretty much a wrap up of this hands-on lab. So hopefully you guys got a lot of value out of that. You can just see just how easy it is to kind of ingest data into Snowflake, build that semantic model, and then come up with insights from that semantic model layer, right? Just using a Streamlit application. And I want to you to kind of talk about this.
Yeah, thank you so much, Raymond. And I think that there was a lot of information, and I guess a few of these folks here can probably go back and try out the whole hands-on experience while watching the replay of the webinar as well. But just to conclude, I think today's session, it is very clear that the AI-driven insights is going to create better campaigns, right? I think one thing that is for certain is that the more AI that we use, the more we are better understand our customer data properly, the better kind of campaigns that we can actually do. And obviously, the most important thing for us is at some point, all these data that we use today have to kind of be unlocked using, activation platforms like Braze, so that you are able to unlock that long-term customer value and the long-term relationship. And, one of the key things that we definitely see is that as long as you marry data in the right place, and putting that together with real-time engagement is going to be critical for the long-run success of a business in terms of revenue generation, in terms of conversion rates, and all that whatnot. And today is just a very quick example where Raymond just illustrated how Snowflake can actually just deliver value by having the Cortex AI agent understand your data a lot better using AI. And within Braze itself, you can also augment that with the AI functionalities within Braze to drive even more customer value that way. So back to you, Raymond. Thank you so much for today's session.
Yeah, thanks, Jaden. All right, so we'll kind of wrap it up here. And something I do want to point out is we do have the Snowflake World Tour happening right now. So we actually have Bangalore happening on Friday, Kuala Lumpur happening early October, Auckland early October as well. But we also have our virtual World Tour, and that's on the 7th to the 10th of October. So if you scan that QR code, there's going to be a lot of key highlights, and the best highlights that come from our World Tours is going to be on our virtual session. All right. And yeah, there will be, another hands-on lab coming soon as well. So if you go ahead and click on this, go on this QR code, that'll actually take you to the registration page for something that's also happening very soon as well. So that's about it for today. I just want to thank you guys all for your time.